Okay, in this video we're going to be looking at the two main causes of unemployment, which are cyclical unemployment and natural unemployment. And there'll be a whole range of things that are included within natural unemployment. So cyclical unemployment is basically caused by a lack of aggregate demand. Okay, it's when there's weak demand side conditions, people aren't spending enough, there's not enough demand for goods and services, and therefore there's a high level of unemployment because we don't need workers. This is the type of unemployment we wish to avoid. And then we have what we call natural unemployment, which is caused by supply side or structural factors, which discourages production or aggregate supply. And we'll talk about what some of these supply side factors are. This one we want to avoid. This is what we're trying to avoid when we have a goal of full employment. Natural unemployment will always exist even at full employment. So cyclical unemployment, basically how it works, it's caused by a lack of demand for products. So there's less demand for products, businesses have unsold goods or they have surpluses, so they produce less. Therefore they need less labour, or there's less derived demand for labour, and therefore workers can't find a job because sales aren't as strong and no one's hiring them. So it's basically less demand for products, we produce less because we have surpluses and therefore we need less labour. Sorry for the bad print screen, but decrease in demand, decrease in production, decreased employment, decreased income. And because people have less income, they spend more, and sort of the multiplier effect, that leads to even further decrease in aggregate demand. But this is what we want to avoid. This is what's associated with recessions and depressions and really weak demand side conditions. Okay, then we've got the supply side causes of natural unemployment. And these ones are a little bit harder to get your head around because there's a whole range of different things. You need to be aware of structural, frictional, seasonal, and hardcore unemployment. These are the different types of unemployment. Disguised unemployment is not a type of unemployment really because they're actually employed, they've got a job. So be careful, disguised unemployment is not a form of unemployment. It's just a word they use for people that are underemployed. Natural unemployment, about 4 to 5% of the labour force, and it always exists. Okay, it's the same as what the total amount of unemployment is for us to achieve NIRO. The government don't look to avoid this type. They don't look to avoid this type of unemployment. They accept it's going to exist, but they will try to minimise some forms of natural unemployment. The main form of natural unemployment is what we call structural unemployment. So majority of the 4 to 5% is made up of structural unemployment, and that's basically whenever there's a mismatch between those that are unemployed and the jobs available. So, for example, there might be lots of demand in certain industries, so that we don't have weak demand side factors, but they don't have the skills that are in demand. So, for example, if you were like really good at making VCRs, then you'll probably be structurally unemployed. Or for example, if you get replaced by capital, so if you were working as sort of a checkout chick, then you got replaced, that would be an example of structural unemployment. So it's a mismatch of skills between the unemployed and the jobs available, and it occurs because of structural changes, where businesses basically alter the way they do things. They might alter them by moving overseas, getting more technology, that they're basically becoming more capital intensive, is sort of what we're talking about here. So some examples. The main example of structural unemployment, if you lose your job because of new technology. So if robots replace people, self-service checkouts, anything that's basically a sign of businesses becoming more capital intensive, anybody that loses their job because of that would be structurally unemployed. You have to be looking for work still. It's also caused by a mismatch of skills amongst the unemployed. So one way the government will try and reduce structural unemployment is initiatives to put money towards training, so TAFE courses, more money for university, apprenticeships to try and get people more skilled to reduce structural unemployment. New technology means traditional skills are no longer wanted. So if you have a skill where basically used to be relevant, but now it's not as relevant anymore, it's often the case with people that were involved in sales, door-to-door sales. So Facebook comes along, and therefore we need less salesmen. It also, the high Aussie dollar causing lack of demand in certain industries. So if you're unemployed because, say, you're involved in tourism and the dollar's really high, that would be an example of structural unemployment. It also occurs if within individual businesses they are not profitable or they've got high production costs. So if you're running a business that's lays off staff because they're not profitable enough, that would be an example of structural unemployment. Or if the business decides to outsource and move overseas. So if you lose your job because your company moves to India or China or the Philippines or Bangladesh, outsourcing is a form of structural unemployment. Microeconomic reforms, which is basically reforms by businesses to become more productive, which includes tariff cuts and deregulation and things like that. Again, if you lose your job because we lower tariffs and therefore we're importing more, again, that's a form of structural unemployment. Structural unemployment is unlikely to be caused by a worldwide recession. Well, that's an example of cyclical unemployment, an increase in the use of technology in the production process, that would be a form of structural unemployment. A decrease in the cost of labour in India, that would lose jobs in Australia and cause more structural unemployment. A reduction in tariffs could cause more structural unemployment as well. So the answer is A. The unemployment rate in Australia is likely to fall if the minimum wage increases. Well, that could lead to more unemployment because we won't want to hire as many workers. Interest rates increase, that will reduce demand. The government increases spending on infrastructure, well, that's going to create unemployment. So the answer is C. And the value of the Australian dollar appreciates. The unemployment rate is likely to fall because there'll be less demand for our exports. Frictional unemployment, people that are between jobs, between finishing one job and starting another. So if you voluntarily leave your job, okay, as opposed to getting sacked or replaced by a capital, if you voluntarily leave your job, you are frictionally unemployed. It also includes school leavers, so people that have just joined the labour force because they've left school. Mothers that are re-entering the labour force after having children would also be included in this category. Frictional unemployment between jobs, voluntarily or re-entering the labour force. Seasonal unemployment, pretty obvious sort of termination of jobs at the same time each year. So, for example, if you're a fruit picker or you work as a ski instructor, you can only be employed as a ski instructor during winter. So if you can't find a job in summer, you're seasonally unemployed. Tourists, so certain holiday parks will only have employees at certain times of the year. Fruit pickers only when it's in season. And the last one is hardcore unemployment. That's basically when you have certain characteristics that make it hard for you to hold down a job. So you might be annoying, you might have to be associated with your personal appearance, you might have a criminal record, or a physical disability which prevents you from working. All of these are forms of hardcore unemployment. Certain characteristics that makes it too hard for you to find a job, even though you have to be looking. If you've given up on looking for work because of some of these things, you are not hardcore unemployed. It's only if you're looking. It also includes people that are sort of welfare cheats that sort of pretend to be looking for work but aren't really. That would be an example of hardcore unemployment, assuming that they're still regarded as by the tax office and the ABS as looking for work. A couple of quick true or false questions. Frictional unemployment can never be eliminated even at the peak of the business cycle. That's true because there will always be people between jobs. Regardless of the level of demand, there will always be some person that's left their last job because they didn't like it to get a new one. So that is true. The amount of structural unemployment fluctuates with the business cycle, rising during contractions and falling during expansions. That is false. It's got nothing to do with the business cycle. And I should have stressed that earlier, but the cyclical unemployment is all about the business cycle. Frictional unemployment has nothing to do with aggregate demand in the business cycle. It's to do with supply side things. Structural unemployment is caused by changing technology or international competition rather than by cyclical fluctuations in economic activity. There's your true one. That's what it's caused by. Thanks for listening.